I'll just got it. So I'll just share the screen and able to all of you?
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah, thank you. So today we'll continue our discussion with the technical aspect of adaptation as a process and the two major issues. We discussed one issue in terms of adaptation yesterday, that is linguistic issues of adaptation. And today we will be looking at formal, that is related with the form, and cultural issues in the process of adaptation. So let's begin. One of the major issues which we have touched upon yesterday as well about the form in terms of adaptation is the length of the original literary text and the movie that we are adapting from that literary text. Because the novels that we used to read are probably approximately like 300, 250, and many of them even longer than that pages. And when we are making a film, we have a primary concern in terms of the runtime of the film. That is, uh, the film usually is like 2 hour 30 minutes, or it may max 3 hours. Movies are pretty normal in today's world, because if the movies are too lengthy, then they will not get the screens in the theaters. And at the same time, the movies are too short, the way like we have short films, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Again, the movies don't get theaters for that, they don't get screens for that. So considering the aspect of length is one of the major issues in terms of the form. So normally, while analyzing a literary text, we make the distinction between form and content. We talk about dualism and monism and all those philosophical aspects in terms of analyzing a text. Here, the form refers to the outer shape of the text, while content refers to the message or the theme conveyed by the text. Now, when we are referring to the text, we are referring to literary text here. Let's say we categorize a particular literary text as a novel, but then a literary text that is considered a novel is approximately 300 pages long. And now we are supposed to adapt that literary text for the cinema. So, will we be including everything that is presented in the literary text? Okay, concentrating on the narrative aspect of the literary text, or as a filmmaker or as a script writer or as a screenwriter, will we be just concentrating on the content, that what message this literary text is giving us, or what message I want to take from this literary text and put it in my feature film? So that dichotomy of form and content is one of the major issues when we are thinking about the form in terms of adaptation, because there are so many different literary forms. But when we are talking about films, we have we basically talk about either feature film or a short film. Nowadays, because of the OTT platforms, we also talk about web series, which is considerably lengthier version of the feature film. Okay, so we have only these three forms available to us in terms of adaptation. Okay, and in terms of the literary text, even in terms of, let's say, different types of literary text, poem, drama, novella, novel, even within poems we have epic poems, we have sonnets, we have, even within stories we have different types and lengths of stories. Even within novels, again, we have different lengths, and there are novels which are written in multiple parts. So there are so many possibilities of forms when we are thinking in terms of literature. Okay. In fact, all our English literature courses are primarily occupied with what we call introducing different forms and different genres. When a work of art adapted into a film or web series or TV series, the primary distinction that we see is the change in the form. It was a novel converted into a film or web series, or it was a short story converted into a short film or a film. So we are changing form not only in terms of sign system, but also in terms of its length. There is a novel which requires, let's say, at least 4 to 5 hours, at least 4 to 5 hours to complete that novel. And if you are making a film from that novel, probably that film is only of 2 hours. So in terms of length, there will be drastic changes. Okay, and those changes are primarily based on the decisions of the screenwriter, because screenwriter primarily decide about the content, that what message we want to communicate through this film. Second aspect there, that considering this message, what are the important events written in the literary text? So only those important events will be accepted in the screen writing. So we can't just say that the form and content will remain the same when we are adapting a particular literary work, okay, into a film, any form of film, short film or web series. Okay, so we can't simply expect. Let's say, for example, you must be aware about this very popular book by Frank Herbert. It's called Dune. Recently, there has been a newfound interest in this particular book because one of the you know, very important what we call science fiction director um, of our time, that is Denis Villeneuve, is also making a film on that. But first part is already released, and second part will be releasing soon. So this particular novel, if you look at it very carefully, Frank Herbert's novel Dune, which was published in 1965, was of 850 pages. Okay, so it's quite a bulky novel. When it was first adapted in 1984 by David Lynch, it was a film of 137 minutes. Okay. And in fact, David Lynch was not happy with the film, and he actually removed his name from that film. So the film was released under some pseudonym, something like Alan Davies. Okay. So 850 pages are what we call minimized into 137 minutes, which means that each page is not even getting half minute of representation on screen. Okay. So there has been a lot of what we call removal from the original work, from the source text. While when Denis Villeneuve is making this film, okay, his first part, that is first Dune, the poster is there, which was released in 2021. Only the first part was of 155 minutes. Okay. So which was actually 20 minutes longer than the entire Dune of 1984. And the second part is coming, which is approximately of the same size. Still, if we consider this like there is a movie of 300 minutes, considering both the parts, okay, even in that case, the novel doesn't get the kind of what we call exhaustive, uh, what we call representation that uh, we can read in the novel. And on top of that, Frank Herbert also added 5 sequels to the novel. He added new books to this book, Dune, in terms of talking about different families involved in dunes. Okay. So if we think from that perspective, if we think from the perspective of the writer of this novel who has spent so much time in writing and providing details of the world that he was imagining, okay, do we really get the same world in the film or filmic representation? Okay. And the issue here is when we are thinking in terms of adaptation, it is almost impossible to give what we call word to word representation of the novel or a short story into the film. So you can simply, you cannot uh, cope up with the length of the original work or source text. Like we also say this about translation, that there is no possibility of word to word translation. Similarly, there is no possibility of word to word adaptation. So, as a filmmaker, as a script writer, you will have to make conscious choices depending on what kind of approach you have towards the novel. Okay. I don't know how many of you have seen both these Dunes. There was one more Dune attempted by Alessandro Jodorowsky, but he could not make it. He had a very different kind of idea on making Dune, and there is a documentary available on Jodorowsky's approach to Dune. When a script is developed from a short story, normally short stories do not provide enough material to develop a full length film. Okay. Another feature of short story is it begins somewhere in the middle, and then there will be flashbacks and narrative movement. See, in short stories, normally you don't have character developments. Okay, you are put into those characters where they are struggling with certain event, and that's actually the charm of the short story. We like to read about that. But in a movie, we need to develop these characters. We need to provide a good background to the major events of the narrative, and then and only then you can develop those events. We have to have provide some sort of background to the characters and how they are living. So if you simply try to adapt a short story without adding material to it in the process of adaptation, probably your short story would be a kind of um, pulp kind of film where the audience doesn't get uh, complete information about the characters, and because of that reason they may not be able to connect with uh, the audience. See, one of the features that makes cinema powerful is that there is this identification with the characters. We as an audience, we know the past of those characters, and we know their struggles, we know their conflicts, and that's why we identify with those characters. Short stories don't give us that scope of identification with the characters. So this is again a kind of issue related with the form of a short story. So when we are developing something from the short story, we will have to provide a lot of background information. I'll give you some examples on that. Yesterday we talked about this Satranj ke Khiladi. So Satranj ke Khiladi was a short story of merely 3 pages. Okay, yesterday I said 5 pages, but I was wrong. It was just 3 pages, and it was written by Munshi Premchand, one of the most important Hindi writers and one of the most important Indian literary figures. So, as I said yesterday, the actual story was about these two uh, Nawabs, and there was no mention of anybody else except their family and how their family uh, suffered because of their habit of playing chess. But that was also presented by Munshi Premchand in a very satiric manner. But when the movie was made from this particular short story, okay, the movie was 127 minutes long. The movie was made by Satyajit Ray and it was released in 1977. Now imagine a 3 page short story. How can you convert the short story into 127-minute long film? Even if you use long pauses between the dialogues or uh, very slow kind of film, it is difficult to convert the 3 pages as they are into 127-minute long film. But as I mentioned yesterday, that Satyajit Ray did not want to make a film about these two Nawabs only. Satyajit Ray actually put these two Nawabs in their historical context. And in that process, he added lot of material. He added lot of material. He did good amount of research, and he found out about the contemporary time when these Nawabs were busy playing chess. And Satyajit Ray, as a director, added those historic information into the film. Okay. It is not that he wanted to make 127-minute long film and that's why he's doing research. It is actually he wanted to make a film that can be easily comprehensible for the audience. And that's why it was a necessity for him to provide that background information. You can't just show these two people playing chess and then there is a commentary that their wives are not happy and this thing is happening in our and that thing is happening with India. That won't work. That will not make a film. If you remember the first manifesto of cinema, which was made in 1916, okay, they said that the manifesto said that you will only include photogeny and you will divorce everything that's connected with stage, that is not related to the cinematography. Okay, so where the camera is not involved, then it's not a cinema. If you simply put narratives, it is not cinema. You will have to visually represent, you will have to show the history visually, and that's where Satyajit Ray is creating this film. He is visually remaking or reintroducing and re-representing the uh, Awadh of 1850s, because this story gives us the background of 1857 Viplav. So Satranj Ke Khiladi, the story was only about two Nawabs. Their names were Mirza Sajjad Ali and Mir Roshan Ali. And there was only one mention of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, the king of Awadh. In the story, there is one line that says that Wajid Ali Shah is captured and is taken away by the British people, and these two uh, were playing chess outside the village, sitting near a mosque, and they saw that Nawab Wajid Ali Shah is being captured, but they went back to their game. So that is the only statement about someone outside these two and their game. But the movie has full length sequences of Wajid Ali Shah. What kind of person was he? What kind of hobbies he had? What kind of an artist he was? And it also includes the officers of East India Company. They had a very important role to play. There was Tom Alter and Richard Attenborough playing the roles of officers in East India Company. So there is this very clearly defined historical events presented in the film, which was completely absent from the story. Because when the story writer is writing the story, uh, he is assuming that my reader already knows the history. But the filmmaker is making a film, even if he knows that his audience knows the history, he will have to give the background so that the audience can connect with that narrative. Similarly, one very, very important, very, very interesting film, Memento. I hope all of you have seen the movie. Memento is also based on a short story. The short story's title was Memento Mori by Jonathan Nolan, and that short story was of hardly 5 pages long, which was adapted into a full length 113 minutes film by his brother Christopher Nolan. Memento was released in the year 2000. Story was again approximately 5 pages, and the movie that is created from the story is approximately 2 hours. And the Memento movie is popular for its narrative style. Okay, there is a kind of reverse narrative of certain minutes. This unique narrative technique of the film wasn't available in the story. In fact, it was not possible. If you are writing a story which goes in reverse, probably people will not appreciate the story the way it should have been appreciated. But Christopher Nolan is making a conscious decision to present that narrative in that way, in that reverse way, because his narrator of the story is someone who is suffering from amnesia. That hero, who is also the narrator of the story, had what we call short term memory loss issue. So he can remember for around 7 to 8 minutes. And that's the exact chunk of narratives that you were getting in reverse order in the film. Okay. So it is because the narrator is not trustworthy, and that's why your narrative is going in a reverse direction. Okay. In. So that is the choice of the director. That is the choice of the screenwriter. Okay. It was not the choice available in the story. Okay. The story was like very minimal. There was nothing much available in the story. But when you are converting it into a film, you will have to get into a lot of details. Moving forward, the kind of choices we are making in terms of formal uh, issues, we can remove or add a character in the narrative, like in case of the chess players or the shatranj ke khiladi, almost all the characters were added except these two nawabs. Their wives were mentioned, their servants were mentioned in the story, they were not characters. Wajid Ali Shah was mentioned, the British officers were not even mentioned in the story. But when the script is developed, when the film is developed, all these new characters are added so that you can have a full length film and you can have good background to understand what the director is trying to say. At times we also change features of a character. Like the character had certain features in a story or in a literary work, and when you are making a film, you change some physical or psychological features of that character. Say, for example, there was this Othello. Othello was a drama again by Shakespeare, and Othello's villain was very powerful, Iago. When Othello was adapted in Hindi, Vishal Bhardwaj made Hindi film based on Othello called Omkara. In that movie, Iago was limped. He had problem with his leg. But in original drama, there was no such mention of limping of Iago. So they are changing a feature of the character because that feature becomes symbolic for the audience to understand the character. Okay. It shows the twisted mind of the character of Langda Tyagi, which was based on Iago. Plus, in Indian tradition, we have villains like Shakuni Mama from Mahabharata, who had the similar feature. So it will be easier for audience to understand and connect those features with the character and his or her characteristics. Then we can also remove or add a sequence in the narrative. Like if you have seen a movie like uh, yesterday we talked about Arrival. So if you have seen Arrival, there are sequences where the heroine goes to her university and she starts teaching there. So sequence was not available in the story, but that sequence becomes important in the film because in that sequence we came to know that there are certain aliens uh, coming to the earth, and there is constant news about it because all the students were disturbed by uh, someone calling them or someone messaging them informing about these aliens. So then one student asked the heroine to switch on the news where we get to know about the aliens presence on the earth. This sequence wasn't there, but this is added so that as an audience we also have that kind of surprise that the way these characters were facing. Then we also change the names of the character. Like yesterday we talked about uh, Arrival. The names of those characters were Raspberry and something, but they were changed to what we call uh, Abbott and Costello because those names becomes more significant in this narrative of the story. Okay. And there are many such examples. For example, this very popular film by Ketan Mehta, it's called Mirch Masala, in which Smita Patil uh, played the lead role. So in the original story, the other women in the in that particular mm, confinement or trapped. Okay. Their names were not mentioned, but in the film, their names were mentioned. Their names were Amba, Lakshmi, Sita, Saraswati. So, director is making a conscious choice here that he is making a statement that all these, basically, these are the names of Hindu goddesses, and they are being protected by a Muslim gatekeeper. And that's why the director uses those names very specifically. And the name of this heroine, Smita Patil, was Sonbai, that is uh, a woman of gold, Sonbai. She was as beautiful as gold, which was again not there in the original story. It was based on a Gujarati short story. So, changing type of the narrative, that is generic changes. The original film is, or original story is, let's say, more about the social drama. But then when you adapt it, it becomes more of a comedy or romance, or it may turn out to be science fiction, the way um, Dennis Villeneuve presented Arrival. Because the original short story, uh, not short story, not the novella, was more of a story about the mother's relationship with her daughter, and she's writing this story for her, story of your life, that is daughter's life. But in the movie, that particular narrative was backgrounded, and the primary narrative about the aliens and the issues of communication was foregrounded. So we are making these choices. Okay, all these and many more are conscious choices made by a filmmaker or scriptwriter to have a specific impact on the audience. I'll give you one example. I haven't used Devdas as one of the text in the examples, but I would like to give one example here. Uh, in Devdas novel, there is a sequence where Paro walks to the house of Dev at midnight. Okay, and that was actually a very important sequence in terms of the time at which the Devdas novel was written, 1919. Okay, because uh, uh, an unmarried woman walking, going to uh, uh, an unmarried man's room at midnight, okay, which was a kind of social taboo at that time, and it was evident that the what we call gatekeeper saw her. So people will come to know that Paro has visited Dev at midnight. So that was a kind of big taboo at that time, and in fact, almost all adaptations uh, have used that specific sequence. But when Anurag Kashyap made this film, Dev D, which was a kind of modernized version of Devdas, you don't have that sequence in the film. That is, the unmarried Paro never visited Dev in his bedroom. Okay. And some people, some what we call theorists of adaptation, they also criticized Anurag Kashyap for that matter, that he hasn't been loyal to the original text. But then in this movie, there's a sequence where Paro comes to the hotel room, which is again a cheap hotel room where Dev was staying after her marriage. And she comes and visits Dev, washes his clothes, and cleans his room, talks with him, but uh, she doesn't allow Dev to touch her. Now, this is actually a conscious choice because uh, at the time Devdas was written, any form of affair was a taboo. While when the Dev D is made, okay, the extramarital affair is a bigger issue, and that's why he's consciously what we call transferring this sequence, uh, after the marriage of Paro. In fact, in actual story, Paro and Dev did not meet after the marriage of Paro. Dev reaches to the Paro's house, but he dies outside. Okay. So these are the choices. The sequences are changed. Their names have been changed. Even Devda in Dev D, the characters' names were modified. Devdas is called Dev. Parvati is known as Paro. Chandramukhi is known as Chanda. Uh, that the friend of Devdas, what was his name? Uh, Chunni Babu. So he is known as Chunni. Okay. So that change in the names is also significant because it is modernized, and in a way it is a kind of using a totem that they don't want to touch the classic characters, so they are modifying them into a new form. I hope you people have seen this movie, The Shining. Shining was directed by Stanley Kubrick, and it was based on a novel by Stephen King. Okay. Now, even in this poster, you can observe that the main character of the film is looking straight into the eyes of the audience. In the novel, you don't have the possibility of breaking the fourth wall. Okay. In cinema, we say that breaking the fourth wall means that the characters directly tries to communicate with the audience rather than talking among themselves. So, making the audience aware that they are being observed by the characters. In this film, breaking the fourth wall was used very deliberately and very tactically. Okay. This lead character who is possessed, okay, he all the time breaks the fourth wall, making the audience the ghost. Okay. That is, uh, it is used in a way, the camera sequence is used in a way that basically this character is acting on the commands of a ghost, and that is the audience. So next time you watch Shining again, make sure you identify all those sequences where the character of Jack Nicholson is looking straight into the eyes of the audience and see what he does after that. Similarly, Alfred Hitchcock made a film called The Birds, which was again based on a short story by Daphne du Maurier, the same title, The Birds. And again, Hitchcock is putting the audience into the narrative. In fact, this particular film was well analyzed from the perspective of audience theory, that how audience gets involved into the narrative of the film. Okay. The film is studied from the audience theory perspective, implying that the attacks of the birds is due to the audience's presence in the theater. If audience doesn't come, there will be no attack. Okay. So the birds are basically doing this attack on the villagers because there are some audience members there in the theater who are there to see those attacks. Okay, I'll show you one short sequence, one of the sequences where it is made clear that um, Hitchcock was basically pointing towards the audience. Okay, I'll just share the YouTube link is there. I hope it is audible to you. I'll just share share sound. Okay, so I'll okay. Can you see the YouTube? Also, sequences available in this specific uh, sequence in this specific film, where there are very specific reference to the uh, audiences. Okay. And This is something not possible in the story. This is a choice when the story is selected that I will make a film from certain story or certain novel. Okay. Then while making that film, they may uh, get into all these technical aspects that how do they want to represent that story. And very interestingly, almost all major filmmakers, you can take up Stanley Kubrick, Alfred Hitchcock, Satyajit Ray, and many more. Okay, they make films, and majority of their important films were actually based on some literary works. Okay, so they were also conscious about the importance of literature in cinema. We look at the idea of epic and poem. See, epic is a poem, but epic is considered epic because it follows certain formal features. And when you want to adapt an epic for cinematic purposes, you will have to make a lot of changes, or you may need to metaphorize things to talk about epic. So epics and poems are normally seen as a huge challenge to translation. Similarly, these forms are also a challenge for the adaptation because you cannot maintain the form as it is, primarily because their value is based on their form. When you read Paradise Lost, you read it as an epic, and you basically try to apply the characteristics of epics on the poem Paradise Lost. There was another poem, Paradise Regained, okay, which was also an attempt of writing an epic, but it is never categorized in an epic. Okay. Or if you look at Sanskrit epics like Kumar Sambhavam, okay, where the characteristics of the epics are basically studied, whether this particular epic poem fulfills those characteristics or not. Now, if you change the form, those characteristics will not survive. So, when we adapt, that form must change into something different. And we are adapting for visual purposes. Okay. And we may not be able to use the same poetic language in that film. So it will also turn into something prosaic. At times, these epics are used to create an allegorical tale or spin off from the new perspective. You are talking about epic, but you don't just want to represent that epic as it is. Maybe you take up a stand and you start writing that epic from some other perspectives. Okay, for example, Paradise Lost first book is primarily from the perspective of Satan, or we have this Ravanan film, which was based on Ramayana, but it was from the perspective of the Ravan. Okay. So Darren Aronofsky's a very what we call disturbing film called The Mother, which is primarily a biblical allegory released in 2017, where there are three major characters. Okay. The characters were Mother, which represented Mother Earth. Then there is a character of Him, that is, the Him stands for God. And then there was major character of Adam. Eve was there, but she was not a very major character. She wasn't given a lot of dialogues. So we can see the mother and the god in the poster. Okay, Jennifer Lawrence played the role of mother, and Javier Bardem played the role of God. Now, this entire allegory is from the perspective of the mother, that is, from the Mother Earth. That how we, the worshippers of God, the followers of God, have started exploiting the Mother Earth. The entire movie is about it. So the movie essentially talks about the exploitation of Mother Earth. Similarly, 2010 Tamil language film by Mani Ratnam was a modern adaptation of the epic Sanskrit, the Ramayana. And its title itself says Ravanan. That is, basically, Ravan was the anti hero of the Ramayana. And here, that Ravan is the hero. That is, we are looking at the story of Ramayana from a new perspective. It is a spin off from the original narrative as it is told from the perspective of Ravana, who was the antagonist in original epic while a protagonist in the movie. So because there is a spin off, now you are basically seeing the narrative from a new perspective, from a new point of view. And interestingly, this film uh, became a huge hit in the South territories. But when this film was remade and released into Hindi, it didn't work well at the box office. So that has also something to do with our own consumption of the epic Ramayana. Now we shift to the idea of culture, that when we are adapting any text, we are going into a new type, or we are bringing a text from one culture into another culture in terms of space or in terms of time. So the cultural issues are very important for multiple reasons. A book is a private affair. See, when you take up a novel or a drama or a short story to read, you're reading it in your privacy. Okay. We don't do public reading. Okay, we read books for our own purpose in the place which is our private space, like in our bedroom, in our gallery, in our study room, but it is a private space. Well, film is a public affair because films are primarily supposed to be experienced and seen in a public space like theater. We watch films in public spaces like theaters or family places like drawing room. You watch a film in your drawing room, everybody, all your family members are there, everybody is watching the same film. You are all sitting in the drawing room and you all can read different book, and that is a private reading. Okay, so your reading will not affect other person's reading. But when you are watching a film on a television, okay, the entire family member, whoever is present there, they also have to watch the same thing. Okay, so in that sense, either it is a theater or a drawing room of your house, it is not a private affair. And hence, the content of book and the content of the movie may not be the same, because we first of all have to think about the situation of the consumers. At times, the time dimension also plays a role in recreating the text in adapted form. That is, we are probably adapting a story that's written 100 years back. We cannot present that story in the same way because probably today's audience may not connect with that time dimension. When we borrow a text from some other country or language, like yesterday we talked about Madame Bovary, okay, which was originally written in French, but it was adapted in Russian, in English, in Hindi. Okay, so we have borrowed the text from other country and other language. So in the process of adaptation, we will have to what we call nativize the text. We will have to make the text that is acceptable for our audience. So the kind of practices that are followed in some other countries and some other cultures, okay, may not be easily accepted in our country and in our society. Okay. Say, for example, if you, uh, I don't know how many of you have seen the film called Old Boy, Korean film by Park Chan Wook, which was adapted, unofficially remade in Hindi, and it is called Jinda. So the original film primarily talks about, like, the climax of the original film uh, shows about the incestuous relationship between the father and the daughter. Now, when it is adapted for Indian audience, okay, the climax is completely changed, and any reference to the incest is completely removed from Indian version. Similarly, when this film Nihishabda was made, which was also a kind of remake of Lolita and uh, these Sleeping Beauty, so that again there was this relationship between father and daughter, but in Nihishabda, the daughter is not in the relationship, but the daughter's friend is in the relationship with the father. So these are the changes accepted for the purpose of the cultural uh, adaptation. The text lives in that culture, so text has to adjust with that culture. Text has to adjust with the society and the expectation of the people. So there are many such examples you will find whenever you are adapting a text from some other culture into, mm, let's say, our culture or some other culture. Your text adapted into some other culture, again you will find the changes. Yeah, there is this example of Lolita, which was originally written by Vladimir Nabokov, though his name is Russian, but I've read that the novel was first published in UK. There's been two English films, one by British director and other by American director. Okay. Here, this 1955 book was written by Vladimir Nabokov, a Russian novelist, but the book was in English. It was adapted by Stanley Kubrick in 1962. That is probably within 10 years, Kubrick adapted this book into a film. And book is widely banned, probably even today. In many of the countries, Lolita is banned. And Stanley Kubrick makes a film from that book in 1962, which has to undergo severe censorship. Later, Adrian Lyne adapts the book in 1997. Lyne's version is more overt than Kubrick's, because Kubrick is making a black and white film in 1962, so he has to be more careful about the way he is presenting the text. While Adrian Lyne thinks that now we are modern and we can deal with the subject in a more open manner. So he makes this film, which was more overt than what Kubrick did, but then he did not find any distributors in US specifically. So the film initially didn't receive any distributors in US, and it was first released in Europe. It got successful in Europe. Then the British distributors, sorry, US distributors started buying that film, and it got released in America. But when the distributors were not available for the film, I have seen the interviews, the media briefs by Adrian Lyne and Jeremy Irons, who played the lead role, Adrian Lean was seen crying in front of cameras because nobody was ready to buy his film because he has done a lot. So here the issue is more to do with this idea of incest because it is a taboo across the world. Maybe you can read about incest when you are reading a novel, but you cannot watch a film about incest taking your entire family or friends with you because that becomes a public affair. Okay, I'm reading and writing about cultural anthropology, and they also talk about incest, but I don't necessarily have to involve my family in my reading. But if I'm watching this film on a television set in my home, and everybody is watching it, so that's where the primary cultural concern comes, the cultural definition of privacy, the cultural definition of taboo. So, whenever we are trying to adapt a film, we have to consider these two things first. Whether our society or the audience group for whom we are making the film, will they be able to accept this specific narrative in this specific form in a visual public display? That's where the first cultural issue comes in adaptation. Now, because there are issues related with taboo and privacy, most of the directors will play with those things and they try to change it. They try to minimize it or they try to underplay it so that uh, the movie will not face some sort of backlash. Okay. Many times, director or directors make a very clear choice to present a text in a new time or space. So, when this choice is made, the entire text will face different types of changes. Here, director is making a choice to communicate a new idea or appeal to a new type of audience. So basically, director is using the source text just to play with his idea or just to bring certain ideas from the original text. Director's choice may also be governed by the success of certain types of films and genres. You may probably adapt a historical novel, but let's say in country like India, the historical films are not very popular as a genre. So probably you change that historical narrative into something contemporary, okay? Because that is more successful kind of genre for our audience. Okay. So the target audience is one criteria that director has to consciously think about. Now, these are the three very interesting adaptations of the Shakespearean tragedy Macbeth. First one is a Japanese adaptation of Macbeth, which is called Throne of Blood in English. Okay. And in terms of loyalty, probably except converting it into Japanese tale, the director was very, very loyal to the original text. While the second one, which is a Hindi adaptation of Macbeth, which is called Makbul. Now, here, Makbul is not living in a kind of feudal society. In fact, Makbul, the movie, talks about Mumbai underworld. Okay. So there is no king, but there is an underworld don. Okay. And the lead character, that is Makbul, is his right hand. And he gets that idea that I can kill the Don and I can become the king of the underworld. Okay. And the third one, a Malayalam film called Joji, which is basically converting the idea of Macbeth into something like a family drama. Joji is a younger son, and he wants to get the throne of his father. Okay, and it's about modern life. Okay, there is nothing related with feudalism or underworld. Okay, so there is very interesting inspiration of Macbeth in Joji. Throne of Blood uses, see how culturally Macbeth is adopted in these three different texts. Throne of Blood uses Japanese feudal system, plus it also uses Japanese style of drama called no drama. So all the characters are given certain mask. So their makeup was like a mask, the masks which were used in no drama. And there are two witches. Even in Macbeth, there were two witches. And he creates the director creates the impact and guilt in terms of uh, the clothes that these people were wearing. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth use of kimono. Kimono is that long gown that Japanese people wear. Use of kimono and is sound on wooden floor because they are walking in their house, which has wooden floor. So the sound of kimono on that wooden floor is primarily used to create the effect of guilt in Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. While in Makbul, it presents underworld genre. The king is underworld don. Lady Macbeth here is the wife of the king. See, in original drama, even in Throne of Blood, okay, the Lady Macbeth is the wife of Macbeth. But in Makbul, the Lady Macbeth is actually the wife of the king. But she is the one who brings that idea in the mind of Makbul that he can become the king. So she's playing the same role, but she has a different relationship with Makbul. And that also becomes a kind of motif of conflict in that text. And there are no witches in the film because this is a modern film. There are two witches that is in the role of witches, but they are in the form of police officers. We can see in the poster these two in the middle, they were actually the witches. And their names were Pandit and Purohit. Now, their names were also not taken abruptly. Actually, these are the two castes which have been uh, what we call seeing Kundali and talking about the future of a person. And these two witches in this movie also they first show the Kundali of the Mumbai, the place in which the entire movie is being played, and they say that there is a lot of violence occurring in near future in Mumbai. And then they also show the this Kundli of Makbul, and then they say that Makbul will be the new dawn of uh, the Mumbai underworld. Okay. So they belong to a caste, okay, who are in the business of seeing Kundali and prophesizing about somebody's life. But what was interesting, the most important part was in the original drama or even in Throne of Blood or other adaptations of Macbeth, okay, the witches were just there to make prophecies. They don't do anything else. Well, in this case, in Makbul, the witches were active players. They were actually governing the entire narrative. And the issue of guilt was presented with the idea of pregnancy. The Lady Macbeth is shown pregnant, and both of them were not sure whether it is the child of the king or Makbul. So that thing was also used to enhance the guilt. Well, Joji is Malayalam family drama. The king is the father of the protagonist. His sister in law, that is his elder brother's wife, is both Lady Macbeth because there is no heroine for Josie, and she is also doing the role of witch. That is, in the mind of Josie, she put that idea that if the father dies, all the property will be between you brothers. And that gets the idea in the mind of Josie that he can kill his father. There is no guilt involved whatsoever in these characters, neither in the Lady Macbeth nor in the Macbeth. Okay, fine. So now these are three different cultural approaches to adapt one specific text. But more than culture, they are also considering the target audience, that what the audience wants to see, what their audience will accept. Okay. Of course, Makbul was considered parallel cinema, and it never got the kind of release that today's films are getting. But it is very popular, and most of the film lovers are aware about it. So the way we adapt a literary text into something like, let's say, film, similarly we also adapt a movie into a movie. Okay, so that is what we call remaking. That can be official, that can be unofficial. So different type of adaptation that we haven't yet taken seriously in academic domain is the remaking of an existing film. Okay, the film is already there and we are remaking it. Okay, we probably remake it for new generation of audience, or we remake it to create a new kind of impact from the film. When a director chooses to make a film based on already existing foreign language or culture film, the primary concern here is that if they have equivalence in terms of theme and problems, that if I'm adopting this theme, will my audience accept that theme? The liberty in terms of presentation on screen that a director may have in one place may not be the same at another place. And hence, the director will have to adjust the presentation, the content in terms of his society and audience. In our case, especially in case of India, more than the audience, our censorship is more dangerous. Okay, so we first have to think about that whether this film will be accepted by our certification body. Okay, and considering that, you will be making the film. Let's say, for example, this film, Mississippi Burning by Alan Parker. The film was released in 1988. It was adapted into Hindi. It was directed by Priyadarshan, and it was known as Akrosh. And this adaptation is made in 2010, so after 22 years of the original film. Now, Mississippi Burning is about Ku Klux Klans. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. Mississippi Burning is about the town where a racist murder has taken place. Two Jews and a black man were killed, and there was involvement of Ku Klux Klan. While in Akrosh, because in India you cannot have the kind of racism that Mississippi Burning shows, because India doesn't think in terms of Jews and color. But then we have a different type of racism. So in Akrosh, Priyadarshan uh, uses this text with a new kind of twist. There is a question of honor killing, and again, three young boys were killed. Here, the theme is caste. So the killing is primarily happening in terms of the uh, upper caste supremacist people were killing lower caste boys. The way in Mississippi burning, Ku Klux Klan people killed the Jews and black men. So here you can't just directly talk about, in case of adaptation of this film into Indian narrative, you can just talk about the racism. So you will have to modify as per the requirement of Indian narrative. And for India, casteism is one of those powerful narratives, something equivalent to racism. And the film was interesting. Another important thing is a kind of intertextuality. That is, while analyzing or reading one film, we will have references to some other films or books. And intertextuality again primarily works in terms of cultural significance. Many films are not an adaptation of some existing text, but they consciously make reference to some text and ask viewers to read the film with a special reference to some other text. Here, the text referred to in the movie is thematically significant and hence allows us to read the film in a new light. Because whatever cross reference is given, whatever intertextuality is projected, it is directly associated with the theme of the film. So, if you people have seen this film Kumiko, the Treasure Hunter, which is basically 2014 American film by David Zellner. And in this particular film, David Zellner directly connects this film with 1996 film by Coen brothers called Fargo. So in the movie Fargo, there is a particular bag of full of money was hidden somewhere. But at the end of the movie, we know that everybody dies who knew about that particular bag at the end of the film. So this particular girl, Kumiko, watches that film and she thinks that this bag is still there, and the entire film is about her search for that bag. Okay. So you have a direct connection with the original text. Okay. Though there is no adaptation involved. Okay. But without the original text, without the text Fargo, this text is not possible. So that's a different level of what we call intertextuality we are creating. But is possible because you already have an American film, okay, and that film has a kind of cult status. People like to talk about that film, and Coen Brothers actually became famous for these kind of movies. So the significance of these movies and a movie like Fargo in popular culture allows us to make the movie like Kumiko the Treasure Hunter. Similarly, Dave Benegal made a film in 2009, which is called Road Coma Movie. And it also falls into the category of road movies. Okay. The movie where the characters are constantly uh, transferring from one place to another place. And this film is uh, directly a reference to uh, 1001 Night, or what we normally call the stories of Arabian Nights. In India, it is popularly known as Alif Layla. It was actually the Arabic word Alf Layl, which means 1001 Night, but we call it Alif Layla. So there was this character called Scheherazade in 1001 Night, who is actually using stories as a tactic of survival. That as long as she is telling interesting stories to her husband, who is planning to kill her, okay, she will survive. She is telling good stories, so she will survive. Similarly, these characters in the movie, okay, they have a kind of moving theater, and they have some reels with them. So they use these moving theaters and reels uh, to survive in their journey. They show that movies at some places, and they uh, what we call get some food from those places. They could stay there for some time, and then they move forward. So movie here, the way story was a survival for Scheherazade, movie was a survival for these characters in this movie. So I think that's enough for today. It's already 8:30. Uh, so yeah, I look forward to your questions and comments. So I'll just go through.